So Ben, how was your week?
Oh, wait, I don't. Oh, wait a second. Sorry, couldn't hear you, but that was just me.
Sorry, how are you doing?
Um, I'm good. Good. How are you doing?
Good, thank God. Um, Even though in the Middle East, there's never a dull moment, seemingly. A lot of stuff going on with the Druze, Syria, things of that nature.
Yeah, I saw that.
So that's going on. But summer's here, busy, working, thank God. Um, things are going well, all things considered. We're I was telling people the energy, and I heard someone else say it. I can't remember who right now, but I like it. Like the energy in Israel, if you look around, there's a lot of pregnant women and a lot of cranes
A lot of pregnant women's and a lot of what?
and a lot of cranes.
Brains. Yeah.
People are building and people are having children. It's good energy. It's good. It's good. It's good things to see. You know. So,
Yeah.
so someone else, Micha Goodman, sort of philosopher, called it a pregnant moment. We'll see. We'll see what if Israel could move on to a next level. Okay. Um, we are continuing with our prayer, our our prayer class and our intro. We're continuing with our intro, just sort of doing a general framing of. One second. Did I also invite? Did I put the link in over here? Sorry. If anyone wants to join, of course you're welcome to join. And let me just move this screen. Sorry, no, that's not what I meant to do. Yeah, okay. So I went just because we discussed a lot. I went to look at the video again just to sort of summarize where we were holding, and we went through the concept of again the prayer after prophecy. Right, we spoke how the people of the Great Assembly were part of it. They put it together, and we had the Amida prayer is really the prophets knowing that prophecy is ending and condensing that all into that experience into prayer, right? We were saying how so really we're participating in like a mock prophecy experience 3 times a day, right? We spoke about the blessing of a heretic, right? How was that added on, right? We said we're going to get more into that once we get into the actual prayer, but we brought it up because out of the 18 blessings, this is one that's added, and we're also building a structure right now which includes prophecy in it, right? So we have to ask, we need to be fair. If I'm adding a prayer later on, how is this happening? And we explained that the prophet sort of left a space for this. And we also spoke about Shmuel HaKatan, how he's the one that could end up writing this blessing because he had remnants of the prophetic still in him, and he was kind of hard. We referenced Pirkei Avot, that we learned ethics of our father, how we knew that was something he was known for. We spoke about the idea of the Shema being a top down and the Amida being the bottom up, right? We're creating this we're creating this loop, this divine loop that allows us this flow to keep on happening, and both of them are sort of affirming, right, the unity of Hashem. And this is the idea of we'll talk about it more about Hashem Echad, that idea of oneness, right? We continued in the same vein of we have the prophets, the people of the Great Assembly, and then we spoke about how we have the Kabbalah as well, right? The Mekubalim, who were continuing this practice. Many times it's not necessarily prophecy, but they have their tradition to know how to do these things, right? Because they're Mekubalim. They received the Kabbalah, they received the tradition of how to sequence things properly. And here too, we see that and they were very, of course, influential on our prayers. And we see how that this prophetic knowledge was preserved is just hidden, right? We called it Torah Tasod, of course, in the movements like of Hasidut. And later on, these ideas have become much more widespread, which is a good thing ultimately. And we ended on this idea of the religious experience versus revelation. Right? We're talking about ideas of the aesthetic or guilt or anxiety of why different people see a religious function, right, or the religious experience. And then we said how this is different. We gave the example of right, Avram Avinu, Abraham reaching God not through logic like Aristotle, right, which doesn't have a personal relationship with God necessarily, but we're one of spiritual openness. And I'm trying to, I'm longing for God. We said that he creates like a space of doubt to allow for someone to have like engage in an actual conversation with him. That sound good. I'm omitting, just to be fair, I'm omitting Jacob's comments on Shmuel HaKatan, which he had many, but I'm sure we're still going to discuss. He'll jump on as well.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions, thoughts?
No, not so far.
Okay, so, and to all who are watching, we're like I told Ben backstage that we'll probably get to some text today, but there's just a lot of framing that I want to do that's important to do when we talk about this topic, right? Just like what we just ran through right now was, we just did that through an hour that was happening in 5 minutes, but those are all ideas that we need to explore to understand how we're doing this thing. So there is the Mishnah, which we're referring back to earlier, that is talking to us about the halachot, right? The laws of prayers. They have this very intense phrase, which is, and you might have heard this. You might have heard this in the past, Ben, about enam dim litpalel ela metoch koved rosh.
Right.
So one is not permitted to pray or stand and pray only if he's in this state of mind of he's like this solemn state of mind, right? This is where he needs to be, and this is very powerful language, right? The Mishnah is not telling us that it's recommended or the ideal would be. Rather, it's telling us it's forbidden if you're not in this proper state of readiness. And if this is the language and this is what the Mishnah wants from us, again, we have to ask, like, how am I supposed to know, right? This, what this experience that allows me to stand before God, right? What is this koved rosh? What is this solemn mind space that I need to be in? If the prerequisite to pray is being in this mindset, what is this mindset, right? So the Mishnah also teaches us there that the Hasidim would meditate an hour before prayer to get themselves ready for prayer, right? So the chaven et ratzonam le'aviem sheshem b'shamayim, right? To make sure that what they want, their will is matching God's will. So this would be like an hour worth of meditation. We also see this in the Shulchan Aruch, one of the legal codexes that we have, that also says that that these are individuals that would enter the state of prophecy right before they would start the Amidah. And this, we have to ask ourselves, I don't know about you, but if they were doing an hour, shouldn't we who are like, nothings, shouldn't we be, preparing ourselves for like a whole week or like, this long preparation? And instead, I would say, like most Jews, usually jump in within like one or two, like within a few seconds, I'm starting to pray.
Right.
Just
so you
say
because we're at the lower level, or our connection is harder, we should be preparing ourselves more. There is more muck that we need to go through.
For sure, right? But we know that's not the case. Now I'm saying there are people that do, in fact, prepare themselves, right? People go to the ritual bath every morning. There's some people that really like stand and like say other prayers beforehand, really to get themselves like in that mindset. But generally speaking, on the fly, people waking up, taking their kids to kindergarten, going quickly to the synagogue, they're not spending an hour beforehand, right? They're hoping that the prayer is going to be only half an hour so they could get back, and get back into the highway.
Yeah.
But
I'm just gonna try to change the layout. No, that's too small. Okay.
Can I expand? Quinza, can I expand? Let me see if I could make.
Yeah, if you make it more wide, maybe. But that doesn't. I don't know. For some reason, it seems like you're smaller to me than usual. But okay, that's okay.
Now this would be bigger, right? But a little bit. I seem smaller to you.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just confused.
No, I mean, what would be the reason?
No, it looks good. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I can see the text clearer. So. Okay, I'm sorry to.
No, all good. It's important that you'll see what we're talking about, right? So, okay, let's not dive too into. We'll get to that about why we're praying, how our prayer is experienced. But I'm just saying we should point it out that while we're talking about this covered rush, you can see over here that this is still a question. How are we doing this?
Right.
It's also interesting to note over here too that the language that the Shulchan Aruch is even using over here is again connecting it, like we've been saying repeatedly, connecting it to prophecy, right? Prayer, you need to put yourself in this prophetic mindset, which we asked this question, which we asked earlier. Okay, so if I never experienced prophecy, how am I even know when I'm ready to pray, right? What is this like inner state of, covered rush of being in this solemn state? If you're telling me it's, I again need to go back to this like prophetic place. So Rashi, one of our famous commentaries, he is amazing in condensing a tremendous amount into very, very little. But he says that koved rosh is anava, like humility, right? It's something that you recognize as a person that you're lacking something, and that the you put yourself in a place that you have you're submitting yourself towards God ultimately, right? So it's not just like an emotion, right? This is more of like a theological stance, right? I have to acknowledge that there's a distance between me and Hashem, right? Between me and God, there is this distance. You could even see this in the prayer, which is Adonai Sfatai Tiftach, right? Like God, Master, open up my lips, right? So the word Adonai, right? The word master is already highlighting what I'm saying. The stance, this dynamic, which I am a servant and I'm praying to Hashem, to God, who is a master. And this tension, right? This distance is what allows this shefa to flow, right? I'm creating this space and I'm recognizing who I am and who you are. And once I've recognized that and I've created that space, that is allowing now, I'm creating a space for this shefa. What's the word I'm looking for? Why am I blanking on it right now? But abundance, but of prayer, of blessings, of grace to flow on to me, right? So I want to get myself into this specific emotional, spiritual state, right? Which I'm opening up the gates to encountering the divine ultimately, right? And we should realize though that this is not the encounter itself. This is the preparation to allow me to encounter Hashem, right? Being in a solemn state and meditating for an hour, and even if you get to this high space where you're ready, that's just getting yourself ready, right? That we shouldn't confuse those two. That's not the prayer itself yet. Okay, I mentioned last week how I just think it's worth it to go into this. How there's different opinions in the Talmud, in the Gemara about this koved rosh. So I think it's worth getting into, just talking about them very briefly. There's Rabbi Elazar. There's Rabbi Elazar. And Rabbi Elazar looks at things from, he gives the example of Hannah. Hannah, who was praying, Hannah, and she, one second, let's allow Kirk into here. Hello, Kirk.
Hello. What was that?
I said, I hope all is well, sir.
I'm mostly good, just have a slightly sore throat.
I'm sorry? What did you say, Kirk?
I said I had a slightly sore throat, but that's it.
I'm sorry. Well, speedy recovery. So listen in and buckle up. So we have Rabbi Elazar, right? He holds according to Hannah, who was crying out to God, right? And he's suggesting that prayer is coming from a place of chisaron, right? I'm lacking of something. Now the Talmud really rejects this idea because it says that Hannah's case is very unique. Her famous prayer when she's crying out to God, she is a prophet, right? So she has this knowledge that she knows that the son that she's asking for is already destined to be born from her. Like she's aware of this situation, and this is why that you could pray from bitterness and from like a lack in that sense, but only if it's really grounded in a spiritual truth, not because it's just emotional, right? Just because I'm sad necessarily. And there's Rav Yossi. Rav Yossi decides to talk about David HaMelech, and he quotes his verse of V'gam ani berov chazdecha, right? So even I, David, through kindness, right? I'm going to come to your house. I'll bow down to you, right? So this is they focus on the word chazdecha. This is which is fear during kindness, right? So things are so good. We have this with Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, that things are so well. Katonti mikol chasadim, right? I'm so nervous from all the good things you've given to me, right? That I'm nervous that if I sin, if I do something wrong, ultimately I'm going to get rejected by you, and I'm going to invite sin onto me. I would say that generally this is probably more of a Christian, thought, which is that this has to do with this focus on the sin, right? Because we talk about obviously that en tzadik shelo yichta, right? We talk about this in Kohelet that no righteous person obviously does only good, right, and doesn't sin. But nevertheless, Judaism generally doesn't really base our religious life on guilt, right? There's Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda? No, there's Rav Yehoshua. Rav Yehoshua ben Levi, he holds the opinion of Becherdat Kodesh, right? He gives this pasuk of Yishtachavu LaHashem Behadrat Kodesh, which it means to bowing down to God in beautiness of the beauty of holiness. But he changes in the word in Hebrew, charada, is also like hadra. The letters are very similar and they sound similar, which really talks about not holy beauty, but holy trembling. Which
So it's
is
like Sherda and Hadar, or
exactly. I mean, Kirk, I don't know if you're I think you mentioned Kierkegaard in the past, but this is, his whole idea about religious being being awe, right? When he talks about fear and trembling. So this is a whole discussion sort of that he's connecting this. He would connect Rav Yehoshua ben Levi about this idea. So I would say that here too, we have to also see how when I'm in awe of something, it's also dangerous, right? I could look at something and it could be inspiring me, but if it's only the beauty itself, right, that really would be like paganism and worshiping nature, like we said earlier. I should mention that the Gemara does mention over there as well that Rav Yehuda would make sure to dress himself in very, very fancy clothing because of this verse, because his attitude was no, there is an idea where if you orient beauty, the aesthetic properly, then of course it could also be used as a channel to pray to God. And I mean, he's not unique in this. We already know that the Kohen Gadol obviously is dressing himself in beautiful clothing, and we know that the Aron is in gold. So we clearly know that using these things, using the aesthetic, using nature and focus on beauty is something that's possible. We just have to make sure that's not the end all be all ultimately. Now, the Gemara ends with this unified understanding of all these different opinions, right? Which is each one of these ideas is by itself is just one expression, but ultimately Hashem is unified, and we also want to be unified as well, right? And this is the opinion of Rav Nachman, and he says Gilu Birada, right? This verse from Tehillim, I don't remember which Psalms, but from King David, right? Which would be Gilu, rejoice, right? Rejoice in being in awe, or rejoice in like we were saying about before, fear and trembling. So rejoice and trembling. Sorry, what did you say?
Yeah, rejoice and trembling.
Right. So this this is again trying to blend joy and awe, or joy and fear together, right? So now you would think that these contradict each other, right? Because joy is obviously something that's going to lift my spirits and lift me up, and fear, it really should be something that ultimately brings me back down. But the focus that Rav Nachman's being over here is that no, I'm joyous because I know I'm meeting Hashem, right, the source of all things. I'm fearful because the second I'm in that meeting, and this goes back to us talking about always about modani, right? Am I truly worthy of this life, right? And am I actual faithful to what I'm supposed to be doing over here? So like, there's a fear that happens, but there's also like an amazing joy. And this is, if I have both of those things, that's a sign that I'm actually standing before God. There's a
I mean, I guess
Sorry?
it's a feeling that you can have to, if I try to ground it, it's a feeling that you can have in various situations in your life. If there's anything that you are excited to do, whether it's like
and it's scary.
And it's scary, right? Like if it's a presentation, if it's a client that you need to land, and it's a really big client, maybe that so you're scared to be in that meeting to present. Okay, here's my idea, here's the plan, and then they need to tell you, okay, well, we're game or not. It's scary, but also it's a position that you very much want to be in, right? You're happy to be in that position. Same as like, more clearly, like if you're playing a game or something, or you're in a theater show or anything like that. Like it's scary to be, and like the bigger the crowd, probably the more scared you are. But it's also an amazing moment to be in.
Right. I would say, I guess like the first example I would push back more, but the second example, let's say I was thinking more if I'm like a lead singer of some crazy band and I'm standing on stage before the thing. Because unlike the meeting, I don't know how it's gonna go. The idea, like, I'm in joy already because I've already met the creator. So like the superstar on stage, there's already a validation that like it's packed with 50,000 people. Joy happens, right? There's still the fear, of course. Is this gonna go well, or the imposter syndrome? Like, are these people really all here for me? Like, that's crazy, right? You have to think about it in reverse sometimes, right? Like, is Hashem really, he wants to listen to me? Like, he wants to hear, like, and that's what's amazing. Like, yes, Hashem wants to hear from you, Kirk, and from you, Ben. Like, he wants a relationship with you. So this brings us into, is it moving on the screen? It's moving on the screen, yeah. This brings us really into Shema and its blessings, right? So we're going to get to... Yotzer HaMeorot, right? Creating the luminaries over here. And
is that the Kishurim V'Kelim? Is that open? Did you open that? The Kishurim V'Kelim, the left navigation there. Is that something you can call? Oh yeah, okay.
You mean here? Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was opened by.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. So, okay. So we're probably not gonna do it today, but we're gonna read through these. These Yotzer Marot. We have the blessing of Ahava, Ahavat Olam, right? The love of the everlasting love. Beautiful, 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 everlasting love. And then we, of course, have the famous Shema prayer. So before we dive into the blessings themselves, and our focus is then going to be on the first blessing, the second blessing, the Shema, its blessings, and then we'll go through the Amidah and go through every one of those prayers as well. We should still, now that we discuss what prayer is, and we talked about the historical context and how he pulled it off, and the prophecy, and why we're allowed to do it, and the covered rush, and we need to be in a place that ultimately we want to make sure that we are like we're aligned, right? We want to be in this place that we can pray, right? So now that we're going to start, we should again ask. We talked about this, like I think in the first class, which is why is the Shema itself included into the prayers? Yes, we spoke about the top down. We'll talk about this a little more, but in theory, it's not technically a prayer, right? It's more of limud Torah. Honestly, that's part of just like the Torah that we have. It's something that we're actually learning. And the Tanaim, in the Talmud, and the Mishnah, we're taught that's the one who recites the Shema is going according to what we learned, V'hagita bo yomam v'layla, right? That you should meditate upon it every day and every night, right? So you're ready by reciting this prayer, you are participating in the commandment of learning, right? So why are we putting it alongside the Amidah prayer? And again, the Amidah prayer is the real prayer we're talking about, right? That's what we're talking about, the people of the Great Assembly. Everything else is gravy. But even if it's gravy that I'm about to put together next to the most, we just said the most prophetic thing that we're left. Why are we doing this?
Are we somehow also gonna connect, or maybe that's kind of like a different discussion about like how both of those are also separate mitzvot? I guess the prayer is like the basic, the Amidah is the basic of prayer, and I guess the Shema is saying the Shema in the evening and the morning.
Well, I would say, I don't know if this is what you're alluding to, but okay. First of all, yes, there's the saying the Shema, which is like the recognizing of Hashem, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then, so yes, there's a technical reason also for it. And then there's the Amidah prayer, which is I'm praying, and I'm putting those things together because I anyways need to also declare God's name. But the reason I need to do it like with Shema and why I'm putting that next to the Amidah is because Shema is really is teaching me, right, is who am I standing in front of when I'm praying, right? Like when I'm going to pray, right, Dami Fnei Tomed, who am I talking to right now, right? So this is Shema is here to introduce me into who I'm talking to. It's about to let me know who, it's really defining who Hashem is, who God is in this prayer that we're participating in. And that's why we're looking at this beautiful verse over here. Shema Yisrael Hashem Eloheinu Hashem Echad, right? Hear Israel, Adonai or Hashem is our God. Adonai is one, right? So we have this super, super well-known verse. And I would say that it's I've spoken about this before in the channel, but it's really misunderstood in a certain sense. So there's a discussion here about Rashi and the Rambam, which we'll get into a little, but we first have to ask, like, why is Hashem, right? Why is Adonai mentioned twice? Right? Why are we doing this, right? It could have just said that either Hashem is Echad, right? Adonai is one, or it could have said Adonai Elokeinu Echad, right? Adonai Eloheinu, he is one, right? So we need to explain this repetition. So Rashi's famous example, his translation to this pasuk is that, in English it would be that Hashem, that's our God right now, like which is exclusive to the people of Israel, one day will be the God of all the nations, right? So today it's Hashem Elokeinu, right? It's recognized only by the people of Israel. We recognize Hashem, and Jethro and a few other cool dudes out there. But tomorrow, as in like in the future, one day God will be recognized by all humanity. So he's really seeing this as like, this is like a dynamic mission statement, right? This is like a call to action, right? The mission is really to transform Hashem's presence from being, Hashem of one nation to all creation, to all nations in the world. We often see this in Kaddish, right? When we say in the Kaddish, Yitkadal B'Yitkadash, right? This is echoing what Yechezkel said, which is Hitkadalti v'Yitkadashti v'noaditi le'nei goyim rabim, right? Ve'idu ki ani Hashem, right? That I'm going to be sanctified and magnified, and all the nations of the world will eventually know me, right? So Hashem's melucha, Hashem's kingship, ultimately is incomplete until, as long as it's just us proclaiming it, us being like people of Israel. Right. Yeah. And like also many prophets and Malachi and others all talk about, obviously, that we all have to call out his name. So we obviously have gone a long way since then, when we have, billions of Muslims and close to 1 billion Christians that are all recognizing Hashem. Right. So we're definitely on the path, but there are layers of how to understand, right, the Shema. Right. So this phrase that we're saying that Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, there's different layers to it based on our history. Are you aware I'm trying to think how deep I'm going to go into this, but are you aware, Ben, of the whole tradition with Yaakov Avinu and the Shema?
I might need a little bit more. Right now, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, so in the days of our forefather, the patriarch Jacob, the namesake of the host of this channel, right? So he is laying on his deathbed. He's going to die. And he is fearful that not all his children are going to be faithful to God, right? This is alluded to in the verses, right? And we learned that his sons declare to him, Shema Israel, right? Israel is Jacob's name, right? Israel. So they're telling out to him, listen, our father, right? Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Just like you only have one God, we too only have one God, right? So if you look at it from a historical perspective, this is the first time this is being brought up, and this is sort of like the internal unity that's emerging inside the nation, right? So this is sort of like this national unity that the brothers are telling that, we as the brothers, the sons of Jacob, the 12 of us, we're united with your God. This is still happening. Then we move on to the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, right? So this has like another element to this, which is like a religious element, right? So now he says Hashem Elokeinu, right? Which is the God of Moses, which is like religion, right? And the God of the people, right? The nation of the people, Hashem Echad, right? Are one and the same, right? There's no difference between Hashem of the 12 tribes of Jacob that they just came down to, and the new Hashem that came down from Sinai with these laws. Two of these are one, ultimately, right? So we just added like another layer onto this, still through the same verse in a certain sense, right? So this is the God of revelation and the God of, let's say, history and like politics, right? They're all coming together. And then we have the idea of, like we said, one day, like a machar, in the future, there's the universal unity, right? I talk about a lot about the three different hats that Israel has, which is Jacob, Israel, and Jeshurun, right? So our universal attitude, right, which is one day that we're all going to call into him in one accord, right, like Zephaniah, that I'll transform all the nations, and they're all going to come up to Ve'alu Goyim Rabim, right? So this is really letting us know that eventually all people will recognize God's name. And in this sense, the like going back to the mission statement, right, the call to action of the Shema is each generation is really is there to embody the Shema, sort of it's in his level, right? So in Jacob's time, it's the unity of the tribes, like we said, and Moses, it's the Torah and the identity of Israel. And in our time, in the future, we have to make sure that God's name is recognized all over the world, right? So this, of course, brings into anyone that knows us, the Noahide movement, which we're working on a lot, which is a clear indication to that. But of course, there's a very big challenge when you have all that responsibility, when the world sees multiple wars and things going on. Obviously, there's big questions about how do you want Hashem to be recognized, and are we the people that need to be doing this job, right? So this, again, is it's not only like it's like, again, a theological orientation. It's like we need to reaffirm our purpose, right? That to live as people that are bringing the unity of God into a fractured world, and that is like really tikkun olam, like not in its watered down sense. But yes, Kirk, you were going to say something.
Well, I was going to say, so to tie this into something, it's a little tangential, but I think it's related in this sense. You were mentioning this idea that one day there's an idea that everyone will be basically worshiping Hashem, and that essentially there's going to be a unity of understanding of God's presence in the world.
Yes.
So would you say this is analogous to, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but an Austrian philosopher named Ludwig Wittgenstein's notion of language games, where Wittgenstein had argued that people get confused because people are speaking different language games, and that one way to get rid of this confusion is for people to recognize which language game they're playing and then to join another's language game.
Where do you think he's getting that from, Kirk? Where was there languages that got confused and caused a tremendous amount of disunity?
Well, if we're speaking like more literally in the Torah, to my understanding, that's the Tower of Babel.
Bingo, 10 points. Exactly. And the verse I spoke about in Zephaniah right now, that is the rectification. There it is pure speech, right? And in Babel, in the Tower of Babel, it is Safa Achat Dvarim Achadim. Everything was one. Once everything is one, that there's no diversity over there, right? We're all conforming to sort of one thing. And ultimately that God sort of had to create confusion, right? So there could be a diversity of thought that could come then back together in a unity of understanding, right? So we don't have to be speaking the same language. We want different experiences. And this is why this very much connects to Rav Shirky's teaching of, wanting to have, Christian flavored Noahides and Buddhist flavored Noahides and Muslim flavored Noahides, because each one of these traditions is bringing with itself is already soaked with a certain level of understanding that the other ones couldn't see, right? So we as Jews are supposed to help everyone orient that together and keep on pointing to that point of orientation. Now, it's very convenient for us that both Christians and Muslims, their whole understanding is Judaism is undergirding both of those ideas, right? So that's fantastic, because that is also what we believe in. So it only makes sense that those things would spring from that idea as well.
Yeah.
We good?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, I said I'll mention the Rambam, and Ben. Some of this might sound familiar to you from what we were learning together, right? But obviously the Rambam has like a radically different explanation of reading the Shema, right? And Rambam has a I'm trying to think of it, what would be the exact translation in English, but basically how ultimately the foundation of everything and the pillar of everything is the first cause, right? Which is God ultimately. And he quotes, when he says this, it says in Hebrew, it's like Hamatzui Rishon, but he talks about how Ani Hashem Elohechem, right? And Rambam really bases like this whole verse, this metaphysical truth, right, of God's existence. It's nothing to do with like a historical revelation. It has to do with Sinai or with Egypt, right? It's just, he says Hashem Echad, right? And he separates it from the commandment for the rest of the commandments. He's just putting in like specific verses that he's putting in. He's like omitting certain parts. Like he doesn't mention Shema Yisrael. And we need to notice that like why is he skipping it? Now you could argue that it's implied. Obviously it's talking to Israel, right? But really Rambam is and he's very, very specific with how he uses his words. There is a philosophical choice he's making over here, right? He is prioritizing in classic Rambam fashion, right, this eternal truth, right, over like any historical context that Rashi is trying to like sort of give us over here.
So,
right?
So he's emphasizing that we are repeating. The emphasis here is on repeating this pillar, this theological, philosophical pillar that we need to like anchor ourselves on.
Yeah, Rashi is saying, when I'm saying Shema, I'm just saying that one day everyone will recognize that, this will be understood. But the Rambam is just saying like, no. Independent of people or time or any place, God is one. It's the intentionality in saying this verse is completely different. One is just a faith claim. One is like I said, one is a call to action. While it includes in it a personal faith claim, it's also a call to action, which means you're recognizing that, this is not the case. Rambam sort of doesn't care about that, right? It's like, he's not saying that, we could say Shema Yisrael means that, the oneness of God is revealed specifically to Israel.
Right. So the Rambam it says this is an axiom of reality.
Correct. It's, it's abstract knowledge. Like I'm saying, like it's like a metaphysical principle. Right. So now it's just, but the Torah is not, the Rambam potentially forgot, right, is not just pure philosophy, right? Like the Rambam is sort of like, we're hearing, it's still the Rambam, of course, but we're hearing Aristotle more in that sort of understanding, right? It's the Torah at the end, like we always say, the Torah is not a science book. It's telling us what, not how the world was created, but why the world was created, right? So the Torah ultimately needs to be embodied in history. It can't just stay up in the air, right? So this is why people are willing to give their life for the sanctity of God's name, right? It's like real people that are willing to like put their life on the line for this idea, right? So really, it's Rambam would say that is the most important thing. It's like it's so understood that someone is going to ultimately give his life for this,
Right.
and this is like the most deepest form of personal commitment. I would say though that really, hopefully, that at the end, right, you could say that you could look at the verse and Bayomahu Yeh Echad Shmo Echad, right? On that day, Hashem's name will be one. He will be one, and His name will be one. Is where that both ideas of Rashi and the Rambam they merge together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because then it will be fact by all, and all will of course recognize it and know it. Okay, so is it worth it mentioning? Okay, yeah. So before we get into the text, another important thing to remember is again the context of the Shema. I think it's important to think about these things because when we are eventually going to come back and look at these texts, it's important to remember like how we got to this place, right? So there is a famous discussion in the Mishnah with it's a very deep. Well, it doesn't seem like a deep question. It just seems like a technicality, but it's actually pretty deep, which is Me'ematai Korim et Kriyat Shema. From like at what point do we actually start praying the blessing of the Mishnah, right? This is the first Mishnah of Brachot. I've spoken about this idea, connecting it to the meaning crisis also. But okay, so what is the timing, right? When is the right time that we actually recite the Shema? So when the Mishnah is like telling us over here that the Talmud gives an explanation, which is when you lie down and when you raise up, right? When b'shavkecha u'bekumecha. That's what we say inside the Shema. Let's just open it up over here. Right? And you should discuss it here. And when you travel and when you lie down and when you rise. Okay, so when I'm doing this, so we know that we have this, but like, why is there an emphasis over here about, let's say, the actual timing, right? So we have to understand the historical context of when this is happening. So this is, right, like we were saying that the Mishnah is being put together roughly like 200 CE, right? So this is the post the temple has collapsed, right? We have the Bar Kokhba revolt that Jacob and I often talk about. This unfortunately failed, or fortunately, but it failed. We have the unfortunate Roman oppression and the percolations, right? The rise of Christianity, which is in the same context of the blessing of the minim that we spoke about earlier, obviously, right? So you could look at Judaism at this point in the context when these people are having this discussion of when do we read the Shema. This is what's happening in the background, right? Like these two people that are having this conversation, I think the commentaries also say that they're having it at a wedding, but they're having this discussion. There's death. There's spiritually and politically, Judaism is really under attack, right? So this is happening around, right? So we need to ask really what the question is, right? Could the Jewish people, right, in exile still represent God, right? Without a temple and like a Beit Mikdash, of course, and with Rome and the church slowly rising, right? Are we allowed to even proclaim Shema Yisrael Hashem Eloheinu Hashem Echad? You hear the question?
Yeah.
Right. So can we still proclaim Hashem's name in the darkness of exile? Right. So that's in a certain sense what the Gemara is really asking over here. Yes, there's a technical level to it, but really they're saying, hold the phone. Before I even say Shema, are we even allowed to say Shema? It's sort of terrifying to even think about that kind of concept, but like the self-doubt that you suddenly have with yourself when you see everything around you falling apart, right? The Shekhinah's left. The Nevi'im have to create this, a second ago, I was giving you this whole how beautiful it is that it's prophecy. You could imagine for the people of that time, remembering sort of going to the temple, and now I have to mumble some words that the prophet put together for me, right? So, and everything around me I'm seeing is falling apart, right? So, this is something that we really have to ask ourselves ultimately.
Yeah.
And there are the Shema really has, again, like we said, it's preparing my soul really to, there's the blessings that we're doing in the morning and the blessings that we're doing in our evening. But the sages taught us also that the order of the blessings themselves are not fixed. They're fluid. Yes, you should generally maintain a certain order, but let's say you took the blessing of love and you put it before the blessing of Shema, you did a different order. There could be a reason that that's okay. And by the way, I'm just realizing now that like I stopped on this thing about can we say the exile? Can we still proclaim it? But I'm just saying we're going to answer that. I'm throwing that as a question. It's something that we have to understand again in the context that we're in right now.
Okay.
Right. So we have the blessings that we were talking about over here. Let's just go back to them again. Okay. And again, we'll read them all out fully when we're getting fully into the blessing. But there's Yotzeret Ta'or, right? So we have the Me'orot, which is really, it's focusing sort of on the what Paul Vanderkay likes to call God number one, right? The Arenic God, the God of nature, right? So this is really focusing on God's rule over the cosmos, and it's really sort of how God created this order, right? In talking about the luminaries, basically in this whole world, right? So that is the focus of this blessing. Then after that blessing, we move on to the blessing of love, right? Of Ahavah, everlasting love, right? So this is really the God of revelation, right? So this is learning God, the love of God through Torah, and I'm talking to the one who speaks and teaches. This is the agentic God, right? That God has a relationship with me. I'm not in love with the moon or of nature. I'm in awe of nature. But then in Ahavah and everlasting love, I can focus on my love towards God, right? Now, I would say that you could see a tension already in this, and of course we see this tension in King David, who's the writer of Psalms, right? Which is that there's different verses where you see there's a focus of nature, right? Only in nature. And again, there's a focus on revelation when he talks about God being so perfect and Hashem being so perfect and how he's prophesied to us and spoken to us as well. So again, we're seeing like sort of this duality, like we were talking about earlier with the rabbis, of being in that mind space before you pray, right? So like nature in a certain sense is it's majestic, it creates awe, but it's also silent. And the Torah ultimately, like, it allows for these things to have a voice ultimately, and they're moral at the end of the day, right? And there's Rav Kook talks about this idea that nature is beautiful, but it's also cruel, right? It doesn't, like, the Niagara Falls could be amazing, but ultimately if they crush me over, they don't care if I die or not, right? But when Hashem speaks through the Torah, or when we're reading him in the second blessing, the blessing of love, this is knowing that we're not alone anymore, right? Like seeing the new pictures from the James Webb camera are inspiring, but it doesn't necessarily make you feel loved. Well, I would say that if you believe in God, then you're like, wow, this is so amazing. But you can understand how that doesn't necessarily give you a feeling that someone cares about you, right? And this is, of course, why ultimately, right, we need the Torah, right? So I would say you could even see this would be true in Israel. I'm wondering if you would resonate with this, Ben. But when people say thank God, or in Hebrew Todah La'el, right? They're usually talking about like this non-binding, like abstract deity that they have like in this head, right? But where religious people say Baruch Hashem, right? We say like blessed is the name, right? The person that actually gave the Torah. So these are two different ways of how you're like even interacting, with like modern with common phrases, with how you could see these ideas have subconsciously made it through, right? So ultimately, Hashem is taking a silent force, right? The Torah is taking a silent force, nature, and allowing it to speak, right? It's giving it like a presence at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that's why we all ultimately have to have this. We have to do these things sort of together. And I would say that what we've heard a lot, in the last few decades of like people critiquing ultimately like monotheism, right? That like it brings racism or it's violence or it oppresses people ultimately. And yes, there's truth in that, but there's sort of like a we could see like going back to to Hellenism, right? Going back to like this refined aesthetic culture that's free from anything like absolute like religion. But I would say that ultimately, as we've seen, that history tells like a different story, right? That ultimately we got the Holocaust from the Enlightened West, and uh, the Greek philosophy is really focusing on order and like using Aristotelian terms like form, but it's not really the individual essence, right? It's not. It doesn't. It's not. It's like we said about Babel. It's going towards uniformity. It's not going for uniqueness, right? Like the individual in this case. If you listen to those critiques, I'm really just disappearing into that picture of the James Webb camera, into the cosmic machine. I'm basically nothing ultimately. And I think there's like a fail over there. And this is why one of these fails, you would say, is that this Greek world failed to redeem the world, and they realized that its systems can't ultimately reach their inner soul. And I would say they offered a more softened imitation, in a certain sense, of Judaism, or a clone verse called Christianity, right? Which realized we need something over there to allow us to be able to actually touch the soul, right? And obviously that was extremely, extremely successful.
Yeah.
We'll see. What's up?
I was going to say to you, Hezi, so I think I've told you about him before, but there's a secular Israeli YouTuber I watch, and he comes at things from an existentialist perspective. There's a video of him where he talks about these types of issues. If I post one of his videos in Discord, do you think you might be able to get around to watching it?
Sure.
Okay, because so basically he comes at things from he calls himself like in Nietzschean tradition, but basically a lot of what he says might be of interest to you to give your perspective as an Orthodox Jew, because he basically argues that what you're advocating for, which is more of a teleological understanding, that basically things have a purpose for God, that actually that leads to authoritarianism, because you're basically claiming this is like an absolute truth. Whereas he would argue that like no, anyone claiming to know the absolute truth is like not in the right mind.
I
But
didn't even get into the absolute truth. I'm just talking about like philosophical ethics, right? They're dealing with society, not a person. And the prophetic morality of Hashem's words are speaking to you, an individual, ultimately, right? Like the Torah teaches you that everyone nivra b'tselem, everyone was made in God's image, and they're worthy in their own right. That's not a conversation that you're hearing from the philosopher necessarily, right? Which is, again, we have to be able to learn how to merge these worlds of nature and revelation, which again is why we have both of these blessings of Yotzei Me'orot and Ahava Rabbah, right? One is reflecting God of nature, one is reflecting God of Torah. And this goes back to what I said earlier, that the sages didn't fix the order. They weren't rigid about it, right? That it's not ma'akev, that you could switch between the order of these things, because ultimately we know both truths are needed, right? Sometimes might shine more than the other. It could be a place where you need to have more of your relationship with nature right now. And so if you need to, in your blessing, if you're about to speak to God and right now you're feeling, I'm connecting to God more through the agentic right now and less through the Aaronic right now and less through the agentic, then maybe for your purpose of prayer today, say that prayer first, right? So in a broken world, you have to have majesty and intimacy ultimately, right?
well, yeah, but what I was saying about the absolute truth was not that the Torah does not value the individual or that God does not value the individual. The point about the absolute truth is that from the videos I've seen, he would argue that any philosophical or theological system, whether it's religion or whether it's an all-totalizing philosophical system that claims this is the absolute truth, is wrong. And it seems to me that religion necessitates the belief in absolute truth, because you believe that it's absolutely true that God exists, and it's absolutely true that you know God's revelation. But he would argue you can't prove that God exists, let alone prove that the Torah is God's revelation. And so if you want to believe that, that's fine for you. But then for you to prescribe other people to believe that, which is the logical conclusion of the idea that everyone is bound by God's laws, he would argue like, no, like you can't know something like that.
So that would be a classic, yes, argument where he would say, like, correct, you can't know. Fortunate for me, I'm an Orthodox Jew, right? So I'm in that space where I'm not like, I mean, I would even say that even Judaism, while yes, there's an absolute claim, right? There's a few. I was just talking about this with my brother, or like I look at a few data points, and this is a very weak argument in a certain sense, but I'm throwing it out there for a second, which is God writes inside the Torah, right? If you think like if you were an author writing the Torah, it's very risky for yourself. You're exposing yourself to write that, shal na le'amim achronim, like go and see, and you'll never hear about a miracle like this, a revelation like this that ever happened. He's putting his money where his mouth is in a certain sense, right? He's saying like, and we've heard many crazy stuff. And yet you've never heard the kind of story we have again. And like I said earlier, like the fact that Christianity, like Maimonides, the fact that Christianity and Islam are what they are, the size that they are, is another point, which is saying like, I don't even need them right now saying like, oh, but it's not my exact absolute truth. It's clearly pointing at one direction. That's another huge claim. Lastly, I would say, fortunately for me, my religion, right, doesn't come and proselytize and doesn't demand something from. I mean, there's a general demand to rectify the world, but that's God is not going and saying everyone needs to be Jewish, right? We're saying that the Noahide laws, for example, is saying that like even your friend on his YouTube channel would say like, oh, I agree with these things. So God says, great. You're agreeing with these things and you're giving it a different label. You could call it natural morality, right? We could call it the like we just said right now, we could call it God number one. That's where your relationship is. Great. As whether you're Christian or you're Muslim or you're Jewish, anyone that wants to have a relationship with the person himself has to engage with the revelation. Then I feel comfortable with Judaism, like I said, because I feel like my revelation has not been challenged.
Well, so I think I actually would agree with your point, but the only point there that I would disagree is, well, I would agree that with everything you just said, the one part I disagree is your point about the Noahide laws is that there are Noahide laws which would not be considered natural morality. For example, this friend, he's not a friend, he's just someone I know online, but he does not believe that being gay is wrong, and he does not believe that being transgender is wrong.
Sure.
And certainly the Noahide laws would prohibit at least homosexuality. I don't know the specifics of whether it would prohibit transgender stuff, but at least, like, for example, like if someone's gay and they're not Jewish and you're like, well, okay, God doesn't want that of you. Well, I mean, you can say, well, you're still respecting natural morality by not murdering and not stealing. So like those are definitely natural morality, but I don't think not being gay is a self-evident moral truth in the same way.
Again, one has to understand what the purpose of marriage is to understand why that would one would understand that, right? Like the idea is it's not that the love is specifically is not real, it is that it's selfish. And this also has to do with incest as well, which is the Torah is telling you, look outwards. Marrying your mother or your sister or your grandmother, right, is incest because you're just marrying within yourself. And I want you to see the other, right? We're saying we don't want uniformity. We want uniqueness. You're not going to get that within your own loop. And marrying the same sex is you're doubling down. You're staying within the same gender, right? So that's just not part of the experience that's being wanted. Now, I'm not talking about an individual right now in his own struggles. I'm talking about generally speaking, if you frame it in that way, you can understand that there's an invitation over here that's for something else, for someone to explore and see and engage with the world. Just like I don't want you to kill someone because that's ruining the experience of that life. So too, I want you to be fruitful and multiply. Not only can you do that with a different sex, but also that's not enough. Don't do it with mother or father or sister, because go out there and experience more of the world, because more of the world is you're experiencing more of me, of course. And if you're killing more of me, that's also immoral, or killing my animals, that's also immoral. But even to your friend that would, he could disagree with the explanation I just gave right now. then there are those things that he's accepting already as moral, right? So I'm saying, yes, I understand that. I understand his argument that he could be like, how can you claim that? It's okay.
I have to